Gary Cohn leaving the White House, something that had been rumored for a long time, and a bunch of names have been floated there. And I've got to ask, because one of the names is Andy Puzder. I mean, is it something that you would consider if asked?
Well, look, if the president asks you to serve, you serve. I owe this country a lot. I came from a very, very working class background, scooping ice cream at Baskin-Robbins, and worked my way up to running an international restaurant company. And there isn't another country in the world where a working class kid like me could have done that.
Well, Andy Puzder, reportedly on President Trump's list of potential Gary Cohn replacement to Charlie Gasparino, and what he's hearing right now. The list is starting to shrink, right, a little bit?
I don't know. I mean, here's the thing. I think we should be really hesitant until you get a really firm read. And I don't think there's a firm read. It may come at the end of the day, right? We don't know. But the firm read yesterday was this guy, Chris Little, the automotive executive, who was in the Journal and the Times today. Everybody was reporting that he's in the lead. And then CNBC floats a name. Now, it's a little self-serving because he works at CNBC, of Larry Kudlow. Full disclosure, great friend of mine, that he's in the lead. Larry Kudlow is a CNBC commentator, former Reagan administration budget official, longtime supply-side economist. One of the guys that was behind the Trump tax plan with Steve Moore and Art Laffer. So CNBC is saying he's in the lead. Other names is Kevin Hassett, one of the economists at the White House. Mick Mulvaney, the budget director, is out there. Peter Navarro, the very, very protectionist economist in the White House who's behind the tariff plan. David Malpass, Doug Holtz-Eakin, both economists, longtime economists. Both, I would say, Malpass is much more of a supply side. Doug Holtz-Eakin is much more of a traditional Republican conservative economist. If I was to guess, I mean, listen, the person. Here's the thing. I'm friends with Larry, okay? And I'm not going to divulge private conversations, but here's the thing. I know, without even speaking with Larry, that he would want the job. And I know, based on the type of person Larry is, that he thinks he could convince Trump to back away from protectionism. That he thinks that, because Larry is an amazing guy, and one of the amazing things about it, he actually conquered addiction and substance addiction and drinking, and straightened his life out. Now, because of that, Larry is the most optimistic dude you're ever going to meet in your life. Everything is really optimistic, and he thinks in his heart of hearts that he can, the power of persuasion could convince Trump that he should back away from protectionism. I would tell him, just remember one thing, Gary Cohn, who you're much more conservative than and much more of a free trader than, he had to take a loyalty oath to tariffs, and the minute he said no, he was out the door. So I would tell Larry, you got a good cushy gig at CNBC. Stay there.
Yeah. I shared a table with Larry at a Catholic event last year.
Right.
And I agree with you. He's a great guy.
He'd be perfect for the job.
But you do wonder, because he's been a very vocal critic of these tariffs, and this is something President Trump's not going to be talked out of.
It's interesting you say that, but Larry has softened that criticism. I'm just reading the tea leaves. I have not spoken to him. I have not asked him, you're getting the job or not. I just offered.
Well, what about Navarro? Let's talk about Navarro for a moment, because it wasn't long ago where they said he was out. Everyone was writing that he was gone, he was out, he was dead. And now, all of a sudden, he's the man of the moment.
Here's the thing. If this is just art of the deal, that Trump's going to back off all, demand everything 100% and, settle for 10 to get that 10 that he really wants, that this is real deal making, that's not Navarro. Navarro's the 90 to 100% guy for that job. That's Larry Kudlow. Right. Because Larry Kudlow can work in that environment. And if you look at what's going on now, Kudlow is actually softening his opposition to these tariffs, the way they're being handled. It's really fascinating. I'm watching this play out in the press, and I just know Larry wants this job. Not because of anything he says. I just know Larry. He wants the job, and he thinks Trump is softening. I don't know if this is a softening on Trump's part or whatever. It's hard to figure out. I mean, Donald Trump is kind of a cipher when it comes to economic policy. He never really, as a businessman, because he was mostly not really a businessman. He was mostly, particularly in the last 25 years, a marketer. We really don't know where he stands on these issues. And, obviously during the campaign, he ran on protectionism.
He did, and I think one thing he does want to do is he's already announced that he's going to run for 2020. So I think he wants to be able to go back to these states that he won, the Pennsylvanians of the world, and said, I kept my promise to you. All the names you mentioned were pretty high profile to a degree,
right?
Except Liddell, right?
I didn't even know who he was until I saw it.
Apparently, he's a Jared Kushner.
Kushner favorite.
Yeah. With that, because now we're not sure where he stands. You know, he lost his security clearance. If he were chosen, would that sort of be a nod again to Ivanka and Jared and their power within the White House?
Yeah. Yes, I guess so. I mean, reading the White House these days is like, remember in the old days when China was cut off, they used to call them China watchers? Like all these academics used to like try to discern little moves that China did, little announcement and what it meant for the bigger whole, how the country was run. That's almost like what's going on now. We don't know if General Kelly's staying or going. We don't know if H.R. McMaster's is staying or what their power center is, if they're solidified in their power. We don't know if Jared's in or out or how much in or how much out he is, or Ivanka. I mean, so it's unclear where the power of the White House is right now.
So before we wrap it up, I want to ask about Wall Street's reaction, because what I'm hearing is that Wall Street is cool with everyone except Navarro. And if it's Navarro, the market goes down big time as a sort of saying, hey, you know, this is a guy that wrote like half a dozen books on it. He wants to crush China. I mean, he wants to go into, he wants a trade war with China. And you know, but this is not new. He's a professor. He's taught this for the last 20 years.
No, I know, and he's an articulate spokesman for that point of view, which I disagree with. He's no dummy.
But would that hurt the street, or would it hurt it temporarily?
Charles, who knows? Listen, everybody thought Gary Cohn's resignation would lead to like massive sell-offs, and it really hasn't. I think it becomes. I think the street is much more interested, even if he gets the job, Navarro. What is the policy that comes out? Do these tariffs reflect his stamp on it, or do they reflect the art of the deal, which is ask for 100, ask for the whole Monty and settle for a little bit to move the ball forward? And I think that's where the market's talking. You remember, we got a $1.5 trillion tax cut coming. Yeah. Right? I mean, that's real policy. The rest of the stuff is all rhetoric, and Wall Street will trade off headlines, but at the end of the day, it's on policy.
Yeah, I think it's 100% and take 20% if you can. All right.
Well, okay, 20, 10, 20, I don't care. But let's see where it goes.
All right, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.